Well, hello and welcome. The last video that I shot, I was getting excited about the fact that we were supposed to have some good snow. Well, it didn't really happen. We got 4 inches of snow, followed by freezing rain and sleet, and then a few hours of rain, which sort of beat the whole thing down, and then it all froze. So it's very, very cold out here, but not really a fun kind of snow to go out and do anything with. So today I'm turning to my collection of houseplants for some inspiration. I've got probably, I counted them, and I've got probably about 80 houseplants of all different varieties. Some of them are actually starting to bloom indoors, and I think that's what I'll show you today. Now you may notice what look like blooms on these bird of paradise, but those aren't real. Those are fake flowers, silk flowers, but I think they look pretty. One thing I wanted to do was give you a quick update on the forsythia that I forced last week. This is the forsythia that I picked and forced in my last video, and I hope that if you had never tried it before, that you have tried it yourself. And you can see that these are beautifully open. They are looking great. Now, what I typically do, once they get to this point, they're going to last for probably another week and a half before they start to, kind of fall apart, just as they would in nature, because they don't last that long. What I like to do is at this point go and pick another batch of them, another batch of branches to force. That way I've got some going in the house, and I can keep this process going for 4, 5, 6 weeks until we get to the point where they're actually blooming outdoors, which is kind of fun. Another little update that I wanted to give you is how the amaryllis are doing that I woke up in the last few weeks, and I showed them in the video last time around. And you can see that I've got lots of flower buds started. They've really increased in size, and most of these plants have got more than one bud on them. You can see here's one getting started here. There's another one here. So most of them are doing really, really well. However, there are 3 that just haven't woken up yet for whatever reason, and they're firm. I can feel the bulbs. They're very, very firm. They've actually got a lot of green on them. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with them, but I'm just going to be patient and continue to give them water, keep the soil moist, and hopefully they'll wake up soon. Here is a fun little houseplant. I call this a clivia. I've heard people say clivia, so I guess either one is probably correct. This is a member of the lily family, just like amaryllis. They both come from southern Africa, and this comes in either orange or yellow flowering varieties. And they start blooming typically in March to early April, although this one is jumping the gun a little bit. They're great houseplants because they love the shade. And isn't that a really, really pretty flower? This one is in a north-facing window. It gets absolutely no direct sunlight. They tend to be expensive when you go to buy them, simply because they're difficult to get started, and it does take a few years before they get to a flowering size. Ideally, in order to get them to flower, you want to give them a period of cold, around 5 weeks or so, in the 40s or 50s, to kind of get them into the blooming mood, I guess. This one just starts blooming on its own. For whatever reason, the spot that it's in, it likes it, and I don't usually have to move it anywhere. I only water it once a week. I give it a little fertilizer in the growing season, and that's about it. So a very easy houseplant. Also, they do tend to spread, and I think you can see that here, where the plant has created some small ones at the bottom. So it is a plant that can be divided to be shared with family and friends. This is my larger clivia. This one is also in a north-facing window, and this one I've had for a very, very long time. This is probably the plant itself. The leaves are easily 3 feet long, maybe longer. But you can see it's a beautiful green color, even in this low light condition. Now, if I want this one to bloom, ideally I should be bringing it down to the basement for a few weeks and letting it get some real cold. This one is very heavy at this point, so I may not be able to do that. It's getting to the point where it's a little hard to carry around. But again, beautiful houseplant in its own right. Here's a plant that I really like. This is a black velvet begonia, and there are several different types. Black velvet begonias grow from rhizomes, so they're pretty easy to separate if you want to make another plant. In fact, here is one that I did separate and made into a smaller version. Again, a nice plant that you can share with your neighbors or gardening friends. And the flowers are very, very long-lived. It's a plant that can take, low light. This is in an east-facing window. It does get a little morning sun. It likes to dry out in between waterings. Other than that, it's a very, very easy plant to work with, an easy plant to grow. This is one of the plants that I wanted to share with you today. This is what is known as a parlor palm. And this one is 40 years old, and it is about 9 feet tall with the planter. Parlor palms have been popular for many, many, many years, in part because they can take so many low light conditions and they really thrive indoors in our houses. They are native to southern Mexico and Guatemala, and from what I've read, they are one of the most sold houseplants that there is, which is pretty cool. They need bright indirect light, and I water these guys once a week. Now I've got 2 more that are smaller, and one of the reasons I wanted to show them to you today is because in the wintertime they bloom. And here are a couple of more parlor palms. These are in the, say, 3 to 4 foot size. They are also in a low light area. They're in a north-facing window, but that's plenty of light for them. And you can tell they're happy because they're blooming. Now, it's a funny looking bloom. It's an inflorescence. You can see the little yellow, tiny little yellow flowers in there. This is not a sign that this plant is stressed at all. This plant is actually very happy, which is why it's blooming. The problem with the blooms is that they make a mess. Once it's done, with doing its thing, it wants to form the seeds, and these little yellow balls end up flying all over the room. So I do tend to cut them off before they completely finish their cycle. Here is another very interesting houseplant where the flowers are enclosed in a spathe or a specialized leaf structure. This is Tradescantia spathacea. It's also called oyster plant or boat lily, and it's really cool. The backside of the leaves are this beautiful, beautiful purple color. Really, really nice. And the flowers are small, but they're very, very interesting. Here is a flower that is starting to emerge, and the flowers come out of this really interesting little structure. And if you kind of squeeze it a little bit, you can see inside of it. In fact, there's another flower inside of it. Very, very interesting. And it flowers constantly. But I love, love the purple color of the leaves. And this is one that I actually do make cuttings of to be able to use in my planters. This plant likes very bright indoor light, but indirect light is probably best because it tends to get greener the more sunshine it gets. And what you really want to do is to be able to highlight those beautiful purple leaves. Here is a pot of that Tradescantia that I planted specifically so that I can use it in my outdoor planters. And what I did was I took cuttings from that mother plant, maybe about 4 or 5 inches. I put them in water, and it took, I think, maybe about 6 weeks for it to start forming little rootlets. And then once it did, I planted them all together in this pot. I think there's 6 of them in here. And when spring comes and weather warms up and I start making my outdoor planters, these are some of the plants that'll go in them. Another type of plant that I really enjoy having in the house in the winter is the geranium. And these are geraniums that I had outside during the growing season, and I decided to bring them in for the winter. And they are just blooming beautifully. Now, if you've never tried to do this, I heartily recommend it. As you see, the plants look great inside, and what's interesting is that this is my basement workshop area. It's an area that I don't heat unless I'm down here, so the temperature seems to hover somewhere around 50-55 most days. But the trick to keeping these plants happy, besides giving them, a weekly watering or so, is having a lot of light. And this is a south-facing window. You can keep geraniums in the house over the winter if you don't have a south-facing or something with that much light. However, it is likely that you won't get them to flower. But as you can see, these are really, really happy. And that makes me happy. So here's a fun one. This one is called a walking iris. It's also known as the apostle plant. It's a plant that is native to Brazil, but it is grown as an in-ground garden plant in some of the southern areas of the United States. And you can see here where it's starting to form its flower spikes. Now these ones don't have flowers on them yet, and I'll show you what the flowers actually look like. It's called a walking iris because once this plant flowers, and once that spike flowers, it bends down, and when it bends down, it starts forming a brand new plant. And I think I can show you a couple of them that have finished. And they're at the point where they're starting to form a new little plant there. Each flower only lasts 1 day, but it is absolutely beautiful. This is a very, very easy plant to grow in the house. It can take a wide range of conditions, sun conditions. This one is in an east-facing window, so it gets a little bit of morning sun, nothing in the afternoon. It also can take kind of just a bright light situation. But it's a strappy plant. It's pretty, very easy to care for. I water it once a week. That's about it. But when the flowers come, they are special, even if they only last for a single day. The one warning I would give about this plant, though, is it's one of those plants that all parts of it are toxic. So if you have children or pets that chew on plants, maybe not the best thing to have around. Not deadly, but toxic. And then besides my flowering houseplants, I still have some poinsettia going. These are ones that I picked up for the holidays. But as long as you give them plenty of light, they actually will go for a long time. I'm very, very lucky in that I have a little greenhouse window in my kitchen, and here are some more little poinsettia, and they're still going strong. They've started losing leaves, but I can expect that I'll still have those a month from now.